A plot is underway to remove masterpieces worth millions from Britain's biggest galleries. And replace them with freshly painted fakes. In one of the boldest swindles in art history. The fakes will be hidden in plain sight, amongst the country's most important art collections. Will anybody spot the fakes? In secret, a painting is being created.
A lot of it relies on accuracy of vision.
Which requires a very particular set of skills.
This is so critical now. I've got to really get this right.
The man tasked to make it is no ordinary artist. He lives surrounded by works of the greatest painters of the 20th century.
This is a Renoir, Portrait of a Lady. That's a Matisse brush drawing. Pear trees in bloom, Van Gogh. Claude Monet. Behind you is Henri Matisse, Modigliani.
There's just one small problem. They're all fakes. And the owner, John Myatt, is no art collector. The police called him one of the greatest art forgers of the 20th century.
I didn't think of it as criminal, I just thought it was some kind of game. I don't like the rules, frankly. Isn't there a bit of everybody that dislikes the establishment?
But it's the establishment that holds the art market together. Last year, £9 billion of art was bought in the UK.
They are £370,000.
It's a vast industry that requires buyers to trust that what they're paying for is the real thing.
He thought it was an original work by the Russian artist Marc Chagall, but it's a forgery.
Just as the art market is booming,
it was a scam that fooled the art world.
So too is forgery.
Complete disregard for the museums and the experts that they were deceiving.
The fakes were painted by struggling artist John Myatt, who pleaded guilty to conspiracy to defraud.
But with criminals making billions on the art black market, how hard is it to tell an original from a fake? To find out, we're breaking one of the art world's greatest taboos by planting 7 specially created fakes covering key moments in British art onto the walls of Britain's biggest galleries. On a hunt to find the fake, the public will have to look more closely than ever before at the art around them, asking themselves what really makes a masterpiece.
Is it a fake? Is it real? Nowadays it's seen as, obviously frowned upon, and quite rightly, you don't want to be pulling the wool over anyone's eyes.
And does it really matter if a painting is genuine or not?
There's no heart in a fake.
If the fake's pretty good, then you have to have a bit of respect for the artist that's doing it.
But at the same time, I think it's like, don't steal other people's stuff.
If I could forge something, then I probably would.
Today we're in the Wirral, where people have been ferrying across the Mersey on the hunt for the fake hidden in the Lady Lever Art Gallery, home to the biggest and best collection of painting and sculpture in the whole wide Wirral. The Lady Lever Art Gallery is the collection of just one man, Lord Lever, a Victorian self-made multimillionaire who bought more than 20,000 works of art from all over the world to share with the local people. But arguably, the jewel in the crown is his remarkable collection of fine Georgian ladies from the golden age of British portraiture. It's one of the least forged genres of British art, perhaps because it's just so incredibly difficult. There is one person who's up for the challenge. John Myatt was a secondary school art teacher before using his skills in a very different way. he tried to see if he could pass off his forgeries as originals to some of the most reputable auction houses in the world.
I find it very hard to believe that anybody would authenticate those paintings that I'd done. Unbelievable, actually, but they did. 2 years it took me to really to sink in that this was a crime and that it was all going to end very badly.
Eventually, his days conning the art industry were numbered.
I think logistically for the cops, it was the biggest thing that they dealt with. New York was involved, I think Mexico, Italy, France. They called it the biggest art fraud of the whole of the 20th century.
John was found guilty and sent to Brixton prison.
It doesn't feel good. I mean, I was able to get a hold of pencils and paper, so I could do portraits, 2 phone cards, 1 portrait. That got me a lot of friends around Brixton, Nick. There is a school of thought that says it's a victimless crime. Of course, it is a victimless crime until the paintings are uncovered as fakes or forgeries.
After serving his time, John went straight. But 6 months ago, we convinced him to return, once again, to fakery. Tackling the 18th century artists who gave us the golden age of British portraiture.
To take on the 18th century now in the 21st century, you would have to be a really audacious forger. Constable, Gainsborough, Reynolds, Romney, I mean, they were all technically sublime. When I saw the painting, I thought, this is going to be hard work. It has to look like what old master paintings look like. That's the challenge. To make the world understandable and manageable, you have to believe in 95% of what you see. It's not seeing is believing. It's believing is seeing. And we'll be disappointed if everybody goes and says, no, I think it's that one. I don't want to fail in this task.
And John's fake will pose as one of these original Georgian portraits. Joshua Reynolds was the artistic star of the era and the first president of the Royal Academy of Art. His stylized portraits in classical poses were in high demand among the newer social classes. His great rival was Thomas Gainsborough, and the generation of portrait painters they inspired, such as John Hopner, George Romney, and one of the few celebrated female artists of the time, Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun.
Those eyes are stunning, really beautiful, and the lips, even the colour in the cheeks.
It's interesting, I think, to see if you can really detect a real from a fake. What are you looking for?
She's gorgeous.
I don't know if it would feel as authentic, but who really knows? The fakes might be so good that you can't even tell.
I think having a fake, you know, it takes away the worth of the original. That's out of order.
With one imposter on the wall, people are going to have to look very closely at all the portraits to know when they're face to face with the fake. All across the nation, a hunt is underway to find the fake paintings concealed in our greatest public galleries. And here in the Wirral, at the Lady Lever Art Gallery, our fake hides amongst this world-class collection of 18th century portraiture. Discovering the fake will take a keen eye for detail. One person who's intimately acquainted with these fine Georgian ladies is art historian Rose Balston.
Our fake today is clearly an 18th century portrait. This lot all seem to be women. Did they not paint men then?
Yes, of course they painted men in the 18th century, but we do have the most dazzling array of splendid 18th century women here.
What sort of people are these women who are having their portraits painted?
Well, we've got a real mix. So we have the aristocracy, but we also have the newly rich century.
The bourgeoisie?
Absolutely.
So these people are common as filth, you're saying?
No. The 18th century is interesting because they'd made huge amounts of money on the slave trade, and they wanted to find a way in which to illustrate this newfound wealth, this newfound social status.
These are slave-owning dead people. Why do we cherish their portraits now?
Well, first of all, it's very beautiful portraiture. It was an incredible time for the development of portraiture. Second of all, they're an interesting kind of social document, and there was so much going on in the lives of these women.
The 18th century was really the beginning of the modern era. For the first time, you had this new class, wealthy in their own right, who wanted to let everyone know who they were. And commissioning grand and lavish portraits of themselves was the way to do it. This meant a new demand for artists, and a young Joshua Reynolds stepped up.
OK, 18th century. OK, who's this? Joshua Reynolds. I've heard of him, have you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Susan runs a local art appreciation group, organising trips to galleries.
I think the chances of me spotting the fake are probably 0.
Joshua Reynolds. Elizabeth Gunning.
She's brought her friend Gilly with her, whose knowledge of art history goes way back.
I've been here before, about when I was at school, but I've not been here since. That is huge. Somebody's got an ego to pick. I mean, to have that on display.
I definitely have that hanging in my house, I think.
Would you really? You'd have to have a big house for that. Having that sort of bit like Sherlock Holmes type feel to it, where you're trying to find out which is the fake. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Jay was a soldier who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, but since discovering a love of art, he's now armed only with an aerosol.
See, this is a type of artwork that I'm just not into at all. The artwork that I do is kind of like, it's like urban street art, I suppose, in a sense. Lady Hamilton. Her father was a blacksmith and her mother was a servant. Am I meant to learn something from it? And there's a volcano going off in the background, look. What's all that about? And she's got a tambourine. That don't make no sense to me.
Well, Rose, I'm not sure how impressed people are. I have heard more than one person say, what is the relevance of all these boring old ladies?
Really?
Yeah. A bunch of duchesses, princess of that, and a couple of birds having a piano lesson. Why do we care?
I think there is so much relevance to today. And as soon as you start kind of unravelling those stories, as soon as you start learning about these women in the paintings, they become so much more accessible, so much more fun, and so much more engaging. So here is Elizabeth Gunning. Because she was so beautiful, the night the Duke of Hamilton met her, he wanted to marry her immediately. And he ended up marrying her with a bed curtain for a ring.
Saucy stuff.
And this was really a century for paintings of women. You know, women are becoming kind of celebrities in their own right.
Elizabeth Gunning.
A famous Irish beauty. It's like you could acquaint that with a model, a supermodel of today.
Yeah, it's like somebody painting like somebody like Kate Moss or whatever at the time. This would be on the front cover of OK magazine.
Yeah. I suppose image was just as important then as it is now for people.
Today's modern celebrity culture can trace its roots directly back to the portraits of artists like Joshua Reynolds. By the mid-18th century, there was a new high society, keen to show off their newfound wealth and social status. And one way to do this was to have their portraits painted.
Art was a way of buying prestige and status, and so they want pictures to put on their walls and they want portraits. So there's lots of people suddenly looking for art.
And nobody understood that demand better than Joshua Reynolds. Although not from a wealthy background, Reynolds deliberately befriended the aristocracy, using his talent as an artist and their desire to be painted to get inside the party. Reynolds made his sitters look fabulous, And many of the rules he set are still followed by society photographers to this day.
My job is to make them look great. Sometimes I ask them, I don't want that pose. Give me something a little bit sexy, a little bit, show me something. Make them look glamorous, elegant.
To flatter his sitters even further, Reynolds developed what he called the grand manner.
What Reynolds does is to combine classical poses from antique sculpture that endow his sitters with a very classical, very regal feel. That's where Reynolds, really turns portraiture into something fantastic.
Pictures are very powerful. I mean, the right picture, the right time, the right place. You rise up, you rise up.
Just like in Reynolds's day.
So would you paint them in a normal environment and then put classical backdrops on and stuff? And poses, they're all doing, there's sort of a lot of that.
He's trying to depict her in this new style that was known as the grand manner style, which was taken from classical sculpture, the contrapposto that you would find in sculpture from ancient Greece and Rome.
So I want to be sort of like that, is that it?
Drop one leg. Let's have a hand on a hip. Let's face our body in that direction and turn in that direction. That's contrapposto.
Sir Joshua Reynolds became the most celebrated artist of his era. But as the demand for portraiture grew, soon other painters began to challenge his position as the 18th century's top dog, notably Thomas Gainsborough.
Who's this by? Oh, Gainsborough. Gosh. I know he's a famous portrait painter. And this is the Duchess of Cumberland.
I don't know Gainsborough very well, but I know he's very light and he uses lots of quick strokes, but gentle, thin strokes.
Whilst Gainsborough was famous for his brushwork, Hoppner was an exceptional colourist.
It's classic Hoppner in that it's a great painting of colour. He was known for his fabulous techniques in the day, and along with many of the other painters of the 18th century, he really wanted to understand the techniques of the old masters.
But it's the work of Elizabeth Vigée Brun, one of the few celebrated female artists of the era, whose colourful palette is setting off alarm bells.
See, with that one, it looks quite fresh.
But I'm thinking, does the original look fresh as well? It stands out a bit from the crowd, doesn't it?
Yeah, it could just be the light colours.
Like, I think that sticks out like a sore thumb. And here, everybody looks really, really pale on all the other ones.
But Emma Hamilton isn't the only painting beginning to arouse suspicions. In addition to the colours, some think the devil is in the details.
How are you going to be using this magnifying glass
Well, we're not so sure now because we can't really climb over to get to it, but we were going to look at
Yes, you can, why not?
Because there's a very stern lady, isn't there, that's told us about lockdown
She's not here now.
and alarms, yeah.
One of you create a distraction, and the other one hop over the thing.
I was just looking at her earrings. Oh! Do you think those earrings are the 18th century? And her nose, look at her nose. Well, she can't help that.
It's flat and it's dead and it's very two-dimensional.
Pain by name and pain by nature.
Yeah.
What about Two Girls in the Piano Lesson with the old maid? That the one people think is a fake?
Well, I think there's a lot of interest in that painting because of what they're doing. For young women in the 18th century who wanted to catch a husband, playing a musical instrument was a crucial way of doing it.
Oh, that's how I selected my wife. They were
Was
doing
it?
it
You
then
went
as
and
well.
watched her play the piano, did you? But it's, it's important because these young women can perform, and you can imagine a woman in the 18th century, she's not allowed to be that expressive, she's not allowed to be emotional in front of men, but when you're playing a piano, or if you're singing, or if you're playing a harp, or whatever it is, you can really be emotional. And this was, in the 18th century, this was the great time of sort of sensibility, when emotions were able to be worn on your sleeve.
And how hard would this style be to fake?
I think it'd be really, really difficult. Really get that sense of kind of bursting natural life. He would bring to life silks and satins, and the brushstrokes are measured, controlled brushstrokes. To try and kind of recreate that would be really difficult.
To make a convincing fake, John Myatt must capture that same sense of vitality. and the controlled brushwork of the 18th century. And nowhere is it more important than in the face, which is proving somewhat of a challenge.
That angle is... I started doing freehand sketches to try and learn the face. I figured if I could get the face right, the rest of it wasn't too bad. But I had to get the face right. The top of her left eye is there. That means that's completely wrong. You know, you can't really do a face where everything is kind of slightly wonky, can you? I think I've got that neck too long. If one eye's up and one eye's down, you know, it just doesn't look right. Come on, sweetie. It has to feel like there's a real human being there. I think that's the one thing that our particular artist was able to do. We need that 18th century-ness in there if we can get it. If we can get it.
Once he's mastered the face, the key to a really great fake is mimicking the artist's unique brushwork.
What this is, really, is a series of technical challenges, and you have to try and understand how they painted then and to recreate that today. You've got Reynolds on one extreme, I think, in terms of style, and for my money, Gainsborough at the other end of it. Gainsborough had a much superior way of painting. I mean, end of. Thin glazes, the smooth, silky, buttery kind of finish. Whereas Reynolds, he wanted thick paint, stodgy, thick stuff. And Reynolds kept on fooling around with the paint and trying to make it do things that it wasn't actually supposed to do in the first place.
But it's one thing knowing how it was originally done, it's another thing doing it yourself. John's past life as a forger means he doesn't necessarily stick to the rules.
I never try to use original materials because I don't like oil paint. End of. I hate the stuff. It takes too long to dry. I'm using household emulsion paint and blended with acrylic. I'm going to try and fool them and make it look as much like oil paint as I possibly can. Here we are, little rascal. I'm sure today Joshua Reynolds would have loved to use acrylic because his big problem was that he liked thick paint and it didn't dry quick enough.
Everybody wanted a portrait by Reynolds. In order to keep up with demand, his sitter books showed that he was producing over 100 paintings a year. That's one every 3 days. To discover just how he managed it, conservator Alexandra Gent spent 5 years with the Wallace Collection and National Gallery analysing his paint.
We needed to know as much as possible about how they'd been made in the first place. What materials the paint had been made with, including the pigments and the binders.
What they discovered was remarkable. Reynolds experimented with breaking the established rules of painting and cut corners to speed up the drying time of his paint.
So sometimes Reynolds used things like egg to varnish his paint, and then he would follow this with a layer of oil and then maybe a layer of wax, even spermaceti wax from Wales. And one of the things that he did was to stop using vermilion for painting his flesh tones. And he substituted a colour called carmine, which gave beautiful tonality to his flesh. But unfortunately, this pigment doesn't last very long. So when he painted the paintings, they looked great, but then even within a few years, they faded drastically and looked almost like ghosts rather than real people.
OK, so this is Mrs. Peter Beckford. She doesn't look especially well.
You're absolutely right. These Reynolds haven't really stood the test of time. I mean, there's great elements to them, of course. We have these very pale faces. We have an awful lot of cracking and blistering. The red tone that he used for her cheeks has really faded away, and for her skin.
Tattoo artists Holly, Sam and Graham aren't impressed.
That is a creepy-looking baby.
It is, isn't it?
As often seen in paintings from this period, the child is dressed as a miniature adult.
Right.
It's creepy, why?
It's very white, isn't
It's
it, I
very
suppose?
white.
It just kind of
It looks
blushes
like-
the cheeks. But I suppose the adult looks the same.
It wouldn't have been that colour originally. It's all aged.
I think the child's very odd
Do
looking.
you think it's creepy because you don't like kids?
She just looks miserable.
That does have like a status on it, like.
Mum came home with McDonald's for everyone except me. She does look gutted.
For over a month, 7 fake paintings have been concealed in our greatest public galleries. From Cardiff to Manchester, Edinburgh to London. Here in the Wirral, John's fake has been masquerading as one of these fine Georgian ladies for 3 weeks. And with the word out on Merseyside that there's a fake to be found, gallery attendance is up. And it's turning everyone into rookie art sleuths.
For the picture to be that size, she's obviously someone of importance. No, that's massive, that. Wouldn't fit on my wall. I wouldn't even get it through the window.
Wayne is a mature student who returned to college at the age of 50 to study his lifelong passion, art.
Mum always used to come here with my sister, and when I told my sister, she couldn't believe I was coming here today, because I've never been here before. I wouldn't have married them, because if that's what my mother-in-law is going to look like, I'm going to be scared when they grow up. It all looks like Arthur Daly dressed up.
Christy has a love of classical art, which she introduced to her husband, Dave.
I'm going to be looking for cracks. I always try looking at the finish and the brush strokes to see. It'll be a good challenge. By getting close to the painting, if it's newer, it might smell newer. So, I'm going to use my nose as well as my eyes.
A bit strange, by the way.
So do you fancy her then? Is that why you've been saying this one a long time?
No, it's just, it just looks out of proportion and out of shape.
Her body or the picture? They were funny shaped in those days.
Yeah, I believe they were, but your leg wouldn't be pointing out that way.
So you're saying this is not Joshua Reynolds, this must be a faker? Is that your thinking?
No, I'm just saying it's badly painted.
It's badly painted by Joshua Reynolds, or she's a funny shaped woman.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they had all sorts of terrible diseases in the 18th
Back
century.
in them days, yeah.
And what about Joshua Reynolds generally? Are you a fan?
Never heard of the guy. Never heard of him.
Well, he's long dead. Why would you? And he's not from round here.
No.
We do come to galleries a little bit anyway, and as they're getting a little bit older, we're going to start coming a bit more and more. As you can see, he's a bit of a, a bit of a handful, this one. He wants to get to the art straight away.
Phil studied fine art in Florence and is now a digital artist and illustrator. He hopes his children will follow in the family footsteps.
Oh no, Magnus! No toys or food in there. Catch him back. See, it's little touches like the little buckle on her shoe. It's just so light, like a fleck of white.
Yeah. I think that's been really well done.
Again, there's good depth to the texture of the paint. It doesn't look like it's been freshly painted.
There's a lot of crack.
If this is a fake, then they've done a good job.
The deep cracks of Reynolds' paint would be hard for a forger to replicate, but it can be done. Instead, though, it's the paintings with the fewest cracks that are attracting the most attention.
And what about this girl with the tambourine?
That's thrown me, this, because she looks really new.
Yeah.
It's just a gut instinct. I mean, I'm no art critic or nothing like that, but that just looks too new.
You might turn out to be right.
When it comes to fooling the public, master forger John Myatt isn't concerned with cracks.
People think that crack allure, as it were, is you know, indicative of a really old painting. It's not actually. In many cases, it's just indicative of bad technique. Look at Gainsborough, for instance. There are very, very few cracks in Gainsborough. He used thin washes. He painted thin over thin. Joshua Reynolds, on the other hand, painted thick over thicker. That's a catastrophe. It's actually poor workmanship. Gainsborough's understanding of technique, what a genius the guy was.
Unfortunately for John, it is Gainsborough's genius he's attempting to copy, using a high-resolution photograph of the original.
He did most of the work in the underpainting. So you're kind of, imagine a black and white photograph or a pink and white photograph. That would be the Gainsborough, and then the glazes would go on top of that. Very light washes, almost like watercolour washes over the top. And using something like poppy oil, which is a very quick dryer, and that allows you to kind of modulate because you can blend. There is a kind of a light area going across a face, and here I'm going to maybe a darker area down here. That's closer, I think. Not having sudden transitions, at least in terms of the 18th century technique, is where you want to be.
Gainsborough was famous for his softened transitions and delicate rendering of the face, contrasting with his looser, freer brushwork on areas such as the clothes and the landscape. He didn't like Reynolds's grand manner, preferring to paint more natural poses, painting quickly with light and easy strokes. Eventually, his reputation surpassed his rival, and Sir Thomas Gainsborough became the dominant British portraitist of the late 18th century.
Right, I think I'll go on to a smaller brush now. I'm trying to get that feathery, sort of, that feathery Gainsborough touch. There's a kind of insouciance, if you like, about the way the paint was handled, flexibility, there was a confidence in it that and I was very keen to get into my version. It's just the kind of way that the paint leaves the brush, you know, it's just nice and like this. That's rather good, isn't it? I like that quite a bit. Certain parts of our painting are very loose, actually, towards the décolletage or whatever it is. Very loose, just... The nice thing about the looseness is that where you really tighten up, it pulls you in towards the face, which is what you're supposed to be looking at anyway. It's a portrait, after all.
Faking Gainsborough's technique is one thing, but faking 250 years of aging requires a more radical approach.
Instant coffee. Now, we're going to tip this all over the painting. Years of tobacco smoke, paraffin lamps, you name it. I think I'm pretty happy with what I've got. It's not too far away.
Back at the gallery, the search is nearing its end, and hundreds of people have been scrutinising the collection to find the fake.
I don't think they had tambourines back then.
Straight away, I'm just thinking, this is the fake. This, to me, just looks too this age.
The two clear front runners suspected as the imposter are Emma Hamilton and Anne Luttrell.
I think the thing that we've got to consider when looking at these paintings is not just about the sitter, but it's also about the social scene in the 18th century, which was really developing and changing, and there was so much going on in the lives of these women. There was so much scandal. Anne Luttrell, for example, who was the Duchess of Cumberland, she was a commoner, but she married the younger brother of King George III.
Oh, so she was able to pick a winner.
She did seriously well. But the king was so cross. He established the Royal Marriages Act, which meant that members of the royal family couldn't get married without the sovereign's permission.
So she was so smoking hot, they had to have an Act of Parliament banning her.
Well, she did have quite a reputation. You know, she was a great celebrity of her day. Kitty Fisher, although she's not represented here, was also a great celebrity of her day. We've got Elizabeth Gunning over here. No, not prostitutes, Giles.
Kitty Fisher?
Always goes back to sex, doesn't it?
Well, yes. That's life, Rose. That's Emma Hamilton, isn't it? With
It
the
is.
tambourine. She was Nelson's mistress, that one.
She was Nelson's mistress, she was a famed beauty. She came from no particular background, she had no family wealth or anything, but because she was very attractive, she kind of used her beauty in order to be able to advance herself.
Some people seem to think that she's the fake.
And I think that's because she's in quite an unusual position for an 18th century woman. She's playing a tambourine, she's running around in front of a volcano. There's a little bit of double entendre going on there.
Oh, it always comes down to sex with you, doesn't it?
John's fake has been hanging in the Lady Lever Art Gallery for 4 weeks. The people who have visited over the last month have analysed the paintings and are back to see the fake finally revealed. Unbeknownst to them, someone else has smuggled his way into the exhibition.
This is the first time, really, legally, that I've ever had my work hung on a museum wall. Every other time it's happened to me, it's been because, well, it's been a criminal thing, hasn't it? So this is the first time I've ever done this, and I can actually go hands up, yeah! Let's just hope it will fool more than half of the people.
It doesn't look very fluid to me, because the same guy did that one. But I don't think it's the fake.
It's got depth on it.
It doesn't look very natural, not compared to this one.
So your picture is hanging there in the gallery. Have you been listening to people talking about it?
One or two.
And what have you heard?
The one guy spotted immediately with the eyebrows, which he felt were very 20th century.
Why did you choose to paint it in acrylic rather than oil?
I don't like oil paint. What I could have done, possibly, is used oil glazes at the very end of the process, because you can paint oil over water, but not the other way around. I'm not saying it's a bad job. I would have, but what I want to do is be in here and go, nobody spotted my painting.
How many people do you think are going to guess your picture?
Most of them.
Do you?
I would like the painting to be more distressed. These kind of paintings grew up when people were smoking cigars and cigarettes, when houses were lit with paraffin lamps. That applies to just about everything in this whole gallery.
I know that you have fooled quite a lot of people. Clearly, you were dangerous enough to need to be put away. Does your past make you more appealing to someone as a copyist?
Yes.
Because that's what you did.
Doesn't mean I'm any good, though, does it?
As John awaits the public reaction, the people of the Wirral make their final guesses.
I'm going to have to go for the Lady Hamilton piece. I think that's possibly the fake. There was like a line across it's like a crease. It looked as if it was a man-made crease. That's the best I could do.
10% of people who've been hunting down the fake currently agree with Jay and think that Emma Hamilton is bogus.
It's pretty hard, isn't it? It's pretty... We are torn between two, which we think are fake, don't we?
Yes.
It's Mrs. Payne and her daughters, and the Duchess of Cumberland. So shall we go with Mrs. Payne and her daughters as the fake?
Yes.
Right, we've made a decision.
Just 3% agree with Alison that Mrs. Payne isn't legit. The least guessed painting was Reynolds' Mrs. Beckford, with just 1% of people suspecting her. Followed by his Mrs. Seaforth, Hopner's Lady Howard, and Romney's Sarah Rodbard.
I thought the fake was Elizabeth Gunning.
I disagreed. I thought it was the Gainsborough one that was definitely a fake.
It was a close call between the two, I think.
I think it was definitely that one.
So what's Beardy here doing with his eye?
I don't know. What is he doing? Should we go and have a look?
I don't know. Is he probably looking for Pokemon?
Do you think he's looking for the original? That would be crafty.
I think we're both agreed on it, that
Yeah.
it would be the Duchess of Cumberland one towards the end.
Yeah, the Gainsborough.
Gainsborough.
It looks like she was going to one of them, you know, like transvestite nights out in one of them clubs, because it just come across as one of them pictures.
I think Mrs. Fortescue is the fake.
You're going with Mrs. Fortescue?
Yeah, I am. It's just too fresh.
I don't understand what you're talking about. I would go with the Duchess of Cumberland.
Like Christie and Dave, the public is torn right down the middle, with fractionally more people suspecting the wrong painting than the right one. John's fake managed to fool 52% of those who tried to find it. The priceless original is being removed from deep in the vaults and carried carefully back to the gallery.
Well done, John. You fooled a good proportion of the people.
John's aim was to fool at least half the people. And by the skin of his teeth, he's done it. With the two Annes side by side, it's an opportunity to compare the fake with the original.
It's funny because when you see them next to each other, it really is obvious.
Yeah.
When you're trying to guess, you're a bit, maybe I've got that wrong, but then when you see the real one, you think, yeah, cool.
Well, I'm so relieved that we got it right because I'm so competitive. I just think it was the light. I think that was the main problem.
My eyebrows.
I could tell instantly that this one was painted in acrylic. You're constantly going into galleries and you see the same things and you just look a couple of seconds at a time. And I think now I've learnt from this to really study, actually, look at them paint strokes and see, you know, the marks that were being made.
I knew it was that one. Yeah. It just didn't sit right. Yeah, man, I made up and buzzing. Because I just knew the eye, it was too pointy. And there was no detail in the clothing. Definitely got the black one.
She looks different, doesn't she? That. He's natural. He's got it. That.
It didn't have the delicacy of touch of the period, of the lace and the hair. Now, seeing it, it's very delicate. It's, you know, it's kind of wispy paintbrush. Well, you can't even really see the brushes. Looking at the copy has made me maybe appreciate the original a little bit more, in so much as it shows what a talent Gainsborough had.
It's just much more subtle, isn't it? Much, much more subtle.
Mr. Gainsborough, you know, he'd probably give me a few tips here and there. I'd say, well, it's okay, but, you know, I would have done this. And I'm like, well, okay, Thomas, I'm so sorry, you know. But by and large, I think he'd be pleased.
It's Jolly Brown, the original. I mean, I knew when we looked at the copy, I was thinking this was a bit bright, but then the old one comes in and she wears her 200-odd years, doesn't she?
But I think it's not just the colour, actually. I think it's also the brushstrokes. I think the Gainsborough is a lot smoother. I mean, it's not quite so sort of vigorously painted in a way. And of course, he did use acrylic. There's a lot more subtlety of tone. And one colour merges into the next in a really coherent kind of way. And it doesn't do that in John's. That said, you know, Gainsborough is a hard artist to copy, so it's not an easy job.
So it's a good copy, but it's not a Gainsborough.
His portraits are luminous. They just shine out, as Anne does in that particular portrait. No, it's definitely not a Gainsborough.
As John's fake comes down from the gallery wall, the real Gainsborough is restored to its rightful place in the Lady Lever Art Gallery. Original Gainsboroughs have been auctioned for up to £6 million. So John's phony Duchess is branded and locked safely away. The hunt for the fake 18th century portrait is over, but 5 more fakes are waiting to be discovered. Next time, in Manchester, can the public spot the fake?
Looks like a bit of a crack house, doesn't it?
Lurking amongst the much-loved urban landscapes.
Have you found anything with your magnifying glasses?
Oh, I think that's my granddad.
Of their own city.
You can almost taste smog and cold.
If we can't find the dog, that'll be the fake.